Oldham Council has set itself out as to be a cooperative council, and by that we mean that we want to have a different model of a local authority, and the kind of ethos that underpins that is that we want to be a place where everybody does their bit but everybody benefits. So we recognise that particularly because of reducing resources, there are some things that the local authority can't do anymore. Actually, there are some things that we probably never should have done. So we want to have a conversation, which has been going for a number of years now, with our borough, with our partners, but with the public, about sort of roles and responsibilities. And that means we've put in place things like social value procurement. So we're making sure that every pound we spend adds value to Oldham as far as possible. So we're not about just delivering a set of statutory services. We are about a positive future for Oldham as a place, a positive future for the people of Oldham as well. And that runs through everything that we do ourselves, and we also hold our partners to account on that kind of ethos. In terms of Oldham, there are a number of challenges that face the borough, really. Public health issues, if you look at a lot of the health determinants in Oldham, they're significantly behind the Greater Manchester average, let alone the national average. We also have a real issue in terms of productivity of the borough. And by that I mean we have some really high-end businesses in Oldham, but not enough. We have a population now of 227,000 people. And how do we make sure that they are as competitive as they could be in Oldham, in Greater Manchester, but nationally and internationally? So that's a real challenge for us in terms of getting the educational standard up, getting people's expectations, though, actually what they want to see for themselves and for their family up as well. And actually health is connected to that. So we also want people to see Oldham differently. We have nearly 25% of the borough is in the Peak District National Park. We have incredible kind of parks and open spaces in the borough, really fantastic housing offer. And so actually our place within Greater Manchester is also one of our challenges, so that we're seen as an important and thriving part of that wider city region. The commissioning project came to us in the early stages of the idea, because we talked it through as a management team, and those directly involved, Neil Constantine, for example, who you've been speaking to, running the project directly, but making sure that it kind of fits with the ethos of the council, but also the work that we're doing more broadly. We were engaged with the Cabinet's Office Commissioning Academy in terms of improving commissioning, and for us that was very much about making sure commissioning works as part of the cooperative cycle. So when we're framing the kind of the question, we're really looking at it in a cooperative way. And by that I mean you can have a straightforward commissioning process in terms of, are you commissioning street scene services? So you write a spec, you go out to market, you commission in that way. Or actually, are you commissioning clean streets, which changes completely the lens through which you're seeing the challenge. So we've been doing a lot of work as a council and again with partners on commissioning approach. So this project fitted in really well, both with challenges that we face in terms of the health of our population, but also our approach about changing the way that we commission services and outcomes. My role with the project, as for quite a lot of things within the council, is, I suppose, leadership in terms of creating the environment in which others can act. So do we think it's a good idea? Yes. Do we think it would add value and work with us on our journey? Yes, absolutely. Do you then create the space within which others can go off and deliver the project? Yes. And then kind of when's personal leadership? When do you need the kind of the role of the chief exec or for a senior politician? So, for example, the Physical Activity Summit that we held, which was a fantastic event, I was quite heavily involved in that in terms of the planning, but also the session on the day, but also then the follow-up. And the other part of my role, I suppose, is if we've set out commitments and things that we're going to see, just that oversight to make sure that we're on with delivering what we've committed to. In terms of the Physical Activity Summit, there are a couple of kind of key points for me. I think the first was just in terms of how much was going on in the borough, the level of engagement, enthusiasm, people really keen to be involved. You know, we filled the room, which was really good. I think the other thing, some of the key messages, Dr. Bird, for example, with his talk around the positive impact of physical activity over and above all kinds of other interventions. And the connection that I made really from the Physical Activity Summit was work we were doing on a fair employment charter for all businesses in the borough, where we were asking boroughs, organisations to sign up and say, as a fair employer, we will pay the living wage, we will support things like trade unions if people want to join a trade union, but actually we'll take positive steps to ensure the well-being of our employees. And so the opportunity, which was my pledge on the day, to make sure that the outcomes of the Physical Activity Summit were linked into the Fair Employment Charter, which we then connected into a business breakfast we had through Oldham Business Leadership Group the following week. So it was a real opportunity to bring two strands of activity together to make sure we got it mainstreamed really quite quickly. Following the Physical Activity Summit, I've also challenged our own wellbeing strategy within the organisation, partly because I've got a lead role now within Greater Manchester for mental health service transformation, but also from the work that we were doing around sport and physical activity. Bringing the two together as an employer, we're the second largest employer in Oldham, how are we setting that agenda for our own workforce? So again, part of being a kind of cooperative employer is we want to ensure that it's not just about coming to work, it's about that there's something back. So how do we create the space so that we're looking at after sort of physical and mental well-being, mental health, physical health and well-being, but also challenges for people if they're actually got a mental health condition. But also we have an employee volunteering policy where we say to people up to 3 days a year you can take time and do a positive contribution within Oldham, and that can be through sport, that can be through all sorts of things that will add value to Oldham and connect the kind of resources and skills capacity that we have and fill gaps, but also just people see Oldham differently. You're not just working in the council, you're actually contributing. So the experience of the work, the commissioning that we've done around sport and physical activity has brought that broader focus into our wellbeing strategy, stress risk assessment policy, stress at work policy, to really promote that kind of the positive community connections that we can get through sport, the physical and mental well-being that comes through engaging in those types of activities. I think in terms of the project, the commissioning project, and some of the learning really for taking this forward in other places, there was something as a council we were focusing on improving our approach to commissioning and how do we do that in a more informed way, connected more to outcomes, not just to services and outputs, but also the role that sport and physical activity can play in delivering to the outcomes of the borough. So you need to bring those two things together. So there's something about if you want to have a dialogue with anybody, you need to understand their language. So if you're talking to commissioners, you need to understand the language of commissioning. Otherwise, you're having a parallel conversation and not necessarily landing it in the way you think you might be. There's also something, I think, about always understanding what the outcome of the people that, what matters to the people that you're speaking to. So for me, in the way we said about challenges for the borough, it absolutely is health outcomes, but it's more than that. It's the competitiveness, it's the productivity of the place. It's Oldham being seen as a fantastic place to live, to visit, and actually sport and physical activity can pay an enormous contribution to that. So make the case, but make the case in terms of how this would deliver both the outcomes that we're looking for, directly in terms of a service, but more broadly in terms of an organisation and ultimately as a place.